The command to kneel. The hall of the high court was silent except for the echo of heavy boots against the black stone floor. Two guards dragged Ryan Cale forward, their grips like steel clamps around his arms. Above them, banners of alien victories hung like trophies, each marked with the blood-red crest of the Empress's empire. Every eye in the hall turned toward the human prisoner, some filled with curiosity, others with open hate. The air was thick, heavy, and filled with the scent of incense that burned in golden braziers along the walls. At the far end, on a raised platform of polished obsidian, the Empress sat upon her throne. Her armor shimmered like liquid gold under the pale blue light. Her crown a cruel halo of blades. She was tall, graceful, and radiated a power that seemed to press against the skin. Her voice carried like thunder through the hall. "Kneel before me, human." Ryan lifted his head, his eyes calm but sharp. He had been captured just hours ago during a raid on an alien supply convoy. Now he stood in the most dangerous place in the galaxy, facing the ruler of a people who had conquered 100 worlds, but something inside him refused to bow. The guards pushed him forward until he stood at the base of the throne's steps. The Empress leaned forward, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "I said kneel," she repeated, her voice cold enough to freeze stone. Ryan's mind raced. He remembered the warning from an old prisoner he had met long ago, a grizzled alien with one eye. "Never show them your left hand, boy. Not unless you're ready to change the galaxy." At the time, Ryan had laughed it off, but now, with the Empress's command ringing in his ears, he felt something stir inside him. Slowly, he raised his left hand, the chains clinking as the metal scraped against itself. Gasps echoed across the hall. A faint light pulsed from the back of his hot, and a perfect circle surrounded by jagged lines, glowing with a strange silver-blue hue. The Empress's eyes widened, her breath catching for the briefest moment. Her mocking smile vanished, replaced by something Ryan had never expected to see in her. Fear. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Whispers spread like wildfire through the gathered nobles. "The mark." One voice trembled. "It's impossible," another hissed. Even the guards holding Ryan shifted uneasily, their grips loosening. The Empress rose from her throne, stepping down the black stairs slowly. Her eyes never left the glowing mark. When she reached him, she stopped, her gaze lowering. Then, to the shock of every soul in the chamber, the Empress went to her knees. The sound of her kneeling was louder than any shout. The guards froze, unsure if they should act. The nobles stared as if they were seeing the end of the world. Ryan didn't speak. He didn't have to. The power in the mark spoke for him, its glow steady, almost alive. The Empress bowed her head slightly, her voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "My lord," she said, the words cutting through the silence like a blade. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea why she was kneeling, no idea what the mark truly meant, but he could see the fear in her eyes, the kind of fear only reserved for legends, or gods. One of the nobles stepped forward, his voice trembling but defiant. "This is a trick, he's just a human." The noble stopped when the Empress turned her head and fixed him with a glare that could shatter stone. "Silence," she commanded, her tone sharper than a sword. The hall remained still, no one daring to speak. Ryan stood there, unsure of his next move but knowing that everything had just changed. He had been brought here as a prisoner, but in less than a minute, the most powerful woman in the galaxy had bowed to him, and every person in the hall knew it. They also knew something else. This human, this stranger, now held a power that could topple empires. The only question was what he would do with it. The mark's legend, the heavy doors of the high court slammed shut, locking out the sound of the murmuring crowd. The Empress rose from her kneeling position and gestured for the guards to unchain Ryan. The iron cuffs fell away with a dull clink, leaving red marks on his wrists. She turned sharply, her golden cloak flowing behind her like liquid fire, and spoke in a voice that allowed no argument. "Come with me." Ryan followed, unsure if he was walking into safety or deeper danger. The hallways twisted through the palace like a maze, each wall lined with ancient statues whose eyes seemed to follow him. They passed through a pair of massive doors carved with alien symbols. Inside, the chamber was dimly lit, the air filled with the scent of old stone and something older still, power. The Empress turned to him, her eyes now stripped of arrogance. What you carry on your hand, she began, has not been seen for over 10,000 years. Her voice was steady, but there was a shadow of something deeper. Respect, maybe even fear. They call it the mark of the first ones, she continued, a seal that binds bloodlines and commands loyalty without question. Rian frowned, glancing at the faint silver-blue light still glowing on his skin. I don't understand, he said. I was born on a mining colony. My parents were nobody. The Empress stepped closer, her gaze fixed on his hand. Then your bloodline has been hidden well, she replied. Too well. She moved toward a wall and pressed her palm to a black stone panel. The wall split apart with a hiss, revealing a chamber filled with relics, swords that floated in the air, crowns that glowed like suns, and banners woven with shifting light. In the center stood a tall crystalline pillar, its surface etched with the same jagged circle symbol that pulsed on Ryan's hand. When our empire was young, the Empress said softly, your kind and mine ruled together. Her eyes drifted over the relics. We swore an oath under the first ones, and the mark was given only to those worthy of command. She looked back at him. But when the great betrayal happened, the humans vanished. We thought the mark bearers were gone forever. Rian stepped closer to the pillar, feeling a strange pull in his chest. The light from his hand grew brighter, matching the pulse of the crystal. For a moment, visions flashed in his mind. Fleets of ships beyond counting, worlds bending the knee, alien kings bowing before a single human figure whose hand shone like a star. He pulled back with a gasp, his breath shaky. What happens now? He asked quietly. The Empress studied him, her expression unreadable. Now, she said, you must decide whether to claim what is yours or run from it. A loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the palace. The Empress's eyes narrowed. We are not alone, she said. Rian felt the weight of the moment pressing on him, and the growing realization that the mark was not just a symbol, it was a weapon, and someone out there wanted it for themselves. Power shift in the hall. The crash echoed again, closer this time, shaking dust from the high stone ceiling. Ryan turned toward the sound, but the Empress raised a hand to stop him. Stay behind me, she ordered, her voice carrying the sharp edge of command. Her golden cloak swept the floor as she strode toward the main doors of the relic chamber. 2 guards appeared, their armor dented, their faces pale. Your Majesty, one gasped. The nobles are in uproar. They've heard what happened in the hall. They say a human is claiming the throne, the other added, eyes darting nervously to Ryan. The Empress's gaze hardened. No one claims anything, she said coldly. The mark claims. Her eyes flicked back to Ryan. And it has chosen. They moved quick. Lie through the palace corridors, the sound of distant shouting growing louder. When they reached the high court again, the great chamber was no longer silent. Dozens of alien nobles stood in clusters, their jeweled armor glinting under the cold light. Some shouted accusations, others demanded answers. The moment Rian stepped inside, every voice stopped. The air felt heavy as if the very walls were holding their breath. One tall noble stepped forward, his armor black as obsidian. This is unacceptable, he said. Our Empress bowing to a human? It is treason against our blood. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but the Empress beat him to it. You will watch your tongue, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. This man is a mark bearer, she continued, and by the ancient covenant, he outranks even me. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Some nobles bowed their heads reluctantly, others tightened their grips on their weapons. Ryan could see it clearly now. The room was divided, half feared him, half wanted him dead. The black-armored noble stepped forward again, his voice dripping with challenge. Then let the mark prove itself, he said. If it is true, he should command the guard. He gestured sharply, and a dozen soldiers in silver armor stepped into formation, their rifles gleaming. Rian felt the Empress's eyes on him. This is your moment, she whispered. Speak to them. As their master. Rian took a slow breath, then stepped forward, raising his left hand so the silver-blue light caught every eye. Guards, he said, his voice steady. Kneel. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, as if pulled by invisible strings, all 12 soldiers dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. Gasps filled the chamber, some in awe, others in anger. The black-armored noble's face twisted with fury, but before he could speak, The Empress stepped beside Rian. "This is not a trick," she declared. "This is law older than our empire." Her eyes swept over the assembly, cold and sharp. "From this day, you will kneel to him, or you will fall before him." Rian's stomach tightened. He could feel the weight of power settling onto his shoulders. He had just turned from prisoner to ruler in the span of minutes, and everyone in the room knew it. But in the corner of the hall, hidden in the shadows, a cloaked figure slipped away unnoticed, carrying the news and the danger. Far beyond these walls, the hidden history. The Empress led Rian away from the high court before the nobles could stir up more trouble. They moved through a long corridor lined with stained glass windows, each panel telling a story of war, victory, and betrayal. The light from the twin suns outside bled through the colored glass, painting the walls in red and gold. It felt like walking through the veins of a living memory. They entered a circular chamber deep within the palace, its floor made of black stone polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. In the center, a round table was carved with strange lines and symbols that seemed to shift when Rian looked at them. The Empress stood at one end, her gaze fixed on the table. "This is where the truth is kept," she said quietly, "and where lies are buried." Rian stepped closer, curiosity pulling him forward. The Empress placed her hand on the table, and the lines lit up with a golden glow. Images burst into the air above them. Not drawings, but living scenes from another time. He saw humans standing beside her people, both races dressed in ceremonial armor. They fought side by side against an enemy he could not name, their banners flying together. "This was before the great betrayal," the Empress said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "We were allies, protectors of the galaxy." Her eyes hardened. "But ambition is a disease, and my ancestors were not immune." The images shifted. Rian saw humans cut down in battle, not by alien invaders, but by the very soldiers they once fought beside. He saw burning cities, shattered ships, and the mark-bearers hunted like criminals. The Empress's voice grew softer. "We thought we had erased you, but the truth is, some of your bloodline escaped." The image changed again. A single human ship vanishing into the void. Rian felt a cold shiver as the Empress looked at him. They fled with the last of the mark, hiding it where even we could not reach. He glanced at his glowing hand. "So this mark, it's not just a symbol." The Empress shook her head slowly. "It is a key," she said, "a command woven into the oldest technology in the galaxy." Rian frowned. "Technology?" She nodded toward the far wall, pressing a hidden panel. The floor trembled as a section of the wall slid open, revealing a deep tunnel that disappeared into darkness. "Beneath this palace sleeps the First Fleet," she said. 1,000 warships built before your world had even learned fire. The tunnel seemed to breathe, the air within it heavy with ancient energy. Rian stepped closer, feeling his pulse match the faint hum that drifted up from below. The Empress's voice lowered to a whisper. "With the mark, you could awaken them, and no one in the galaxy could stand against you." Before Rian could answer, a sharp sound echoed from the far end of the corridor they had come through. Footsteps, fast and deliberate. The Empress's eyes narrowed. "They've found us," she said, reaching for the blade at her side, enemies in the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the corridor like a drumbeat of danger. Rian stepped back from the open tunnel, his instincts telling him that whatever was coming was not friendly. The Empress drew her blade, the golden steel catching the dim light. Her eyes stayed locked on the shadows beyond the doorway. 3 figures emerged, cloaked in black, their faces hidden behind masks shaped like snarling beasts. They moved with the precision of predators, silent but deadly. One carried a curved blade coated in something dark and wet, and other held a short rifle, its barrel glowing faintly blue. The last carried no weapon at all, only a strange device strapped to their arm that pulsed with green light. "Assassins," the Empress hissed, her voice low and sharp. "They're not here for me," Rian said quietly, his eyes narrowing. "They want the mark." The first assassin lunged forward, blade aimed straight for Rian's chest. The Empress intercepted, steel clashing against steel in a burst of sparks. Rian ducked low as the second assassin fired. the shot tearing into the stone pillar behind him. The third assassin pressed the device on their arm, sending out a strange wave of energy that made the mark on Ryan's hand flare painfully bright. Ryan dropped to one knee, clutching his hand, the light pulsing out of control. The assassins froze for a moment, startled by the sudden surge of power. It was all the Empress needed. She spun, her blade cutting down the first attacker in a single strike. The second leaped back, but Ryan reacted without thinking. He raised his left hand toward the assassin, and the mark responded like it had been waiting for this moment. A beam of silver blue light shot from his palm, striking the assassin's chest and sending them crashing into the far wall. The third tried to run, but the Empress was faster. Her blade flashed once, and the would-be escapee collapsed. The green device rolling across the floor, silence filled the chamber again, broken only by Ryan's heavy breathing. He looked at his glowing hand in disbelief. "I didn't even know I could do that," he muttered. The Empress wiped her blade and stepped toward him. "The mark will teach you, if you survive long enough," she said, her tone grim. "These assassins were sent by the Council of Blades. They feared the return of a mark-bearer for generations." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Then they'll come again." The Empress nodded. "Yes, and next time they'll bring more than knives." She glanced toward the open tunnel, the hum from the depths now louder, almost impatient. "If you want to live," she said, "and if you want to keep the galaxy from tearing itself apart, you must awaken the First Fleet." Ryan hesitated, feeling the weight of the choice pressing on his shoulders. Once those ships rose, there would be no turning back. Every empire would know the mark-bearer had returned, and they would either kneel or burn. The war awakens. The tunnel stretched into darkness, the walls carved with patterns that seemed to shift when the light touched them. Ryan followed the Empress down the sloping path, each step taking them deeper beneath the palace. The air grew cooler, carrying a faint metallic taste, as if the place had been sealed for 1,000 years. The hum from below grew louder, steady and alive, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. They reached a vast chamber so large that Ryan couldn't see the far walls. The floor was smooth black stone, and above it floated hundreds of massive ships, their hulls dark and still. Each one bore the jagged circle emblem, the same design as the mark on his hand. Some were shaped like spears, built for piercing enemy lines, others like massive shields meant to protect whole worlds. The Empress stopped at the edge of the platform and turned to him. "This is the First Fleet," she said quietly, "built before any empire, before any throne, when our people stood as equals." She stepped aside, her eyes fixed on him. "They will only answer to you." Ryan stepped forward, feeling the pull in his chest grow stronger. The mark began to glow brighter, casting silver blue light across the chamber. As he lifted his hand, every ship flickered with the same light. Engines that had been silent for millennia groaned back to life. Dust and ice fell from the hulls as they slowly began to move. A deep voice echoed through the chamber. Not spoken, but inside his mind, Mark-bearer confirmed. "Command protocols act. Awaiting orders." Ryan froze, realizing the voice came from the fleet itself. He swallowed hard. "Awaken all systems," he said, his voice firm. The response was instant. Lights blazed across the hangar, and the ship shifted into perfect formation. The sound of their engines shook the air, vibrating through his bones. The Empress watched in silence, her face a mix of awe and calculation. "Once these ships rise into the sky," she said, "every world will know the mark-bearer has returned." Her eyes narrowed. "And they will not all kneel willingly." Ryan clenched his fist, the glow fading slightly, but the connection to the fleet still alive. "I didn't ask for this," he said, "but I'm not running from it." The hum of the fleet deepened, like a growl waiting to be unleashed. Far above, deep in the night sky, sensors on enemy worlds began to detect impossible readings. Messages spread like fire through the galaxy. The First Fleet was waking, and with it, war, kneel or burn. The First Fleet rose from the hidden hangar like giants awakening from an endless sleep. Their dark hulls cut through the clouds, silver blue lights burning along their spines. Each ship's engine roared with a deep, ancient power that shook the skies over the capital. Below, thousands of citizens and soldiers poured into the streets, staring upward in silent fear. From the palace balcony, Ryan stood beside the Empress. Wind from the rising fleet whipped his hair and tugged at his cloak. Far above, the flagship, a colossal spear-shaped vessel, turned slowly until its bow aimed toward the stars. Inside his mind, the voice of the fleet spoke again. steady and patient, awaiting command, mark-bearer. The Empress glanced at him, her voice low but urgent. Every world's eyes are on you now, she said. Say the wrong words and they'll unite against you. Ryan stepped forward, his glowing hand raised high. The palace's comm towers carried his voice across the skies, through the void, into the homes and war rooms of every listening empire. I was brought here in chains, he said, his tone calm but heavy. You called me weak, you called my kind broken. The fleet's lights pulsed in time with his words. But the mark has returned. And with it, the first fleet. He paused, letting the silence press into every corner of the galaxy. You will kneel, his voice sharpened, or you will burn. In distant star systems, leaders froze as the broadcast played. Some worlds lowered their banners in surrender. Others began scrambling fleets, choosing defiance. The Empress leaned close, whispering just loud enough for him to hear. This is only the first move. The galaxy will not bow forever. Rian didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the endless stars ahead. I don't need forever, he said quietly. I just need them to remember. The flagship's engines flared and the first fleet vanished into the void in perfect formation. Their shadows passed over the capital one last time, leaving the people below in trembling silence. And somewhere, in the dark between worlds, the first enemy armada was already moving to meet them. The war for the galaxy had begun.